الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تعتدون ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون ولا تكونوا كالذين تفرقوا واختلفوا من بعد ما جاءهم البينات وأولئك لهم عذاب عظيم يوم تبيض وجوه وتسود وجوه فأما الذين اسودت وجوههم أكفرتم بعد إيمانكم فذوقوا العذاب بما كنتم تكفرون وأما الذين ابيضت وجوههم ففي رحمة الله هم فيها خالدون تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق وما الله يريد الظلم للعالمين ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإلى الله ترجع الأمور. O ye who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and let not death overtake you except when you are in a state of submission. And hold fast altogether to the rope of Allah and be not divided. And remember the favor of Allah which He bestowed upon you when you were enemies, and He united your hearts in love, so that by His grace you became as brothers, and you were on the brink of a pit of fire, and He saved you from it. Thus does Allah explain to you His commandments that you may be guided. And let there always be among you a body of men who should invite to goodness and enjoin virtue and forbid evil. And it is they who shall prosper. And be not like those who became divided and who disagreed among themselves after clear proofs had come to them. And it is they for whom there shall be grievous punishment. On the day when some faces shall be white and some faces shall be black, as for those whose faces will be black, it will be said to them, did you disbelieve after believing? Taste then the punishment because you disbelieved. And as for those whose faces will be white, they will be in the mercy of Allah, therein will they abide. These are the signs of Allah comprising the truth. We rehearse them to thee, and Allah desires not any injustice to His creatures. And to Allah belongs whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth, and to Allah shall all affairs be returned for decision. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O who you believe, fear Allah as He should be feared. This is the translation read out to you from the one-volume commentary by Malak Ghulam Farid Sahib. But again, I must remind you that the translation fear is not the appropriate translation for the word taqwa. Ittaqu means hold Allah in such regard as your actions should be guided with the fear that if you do something wrong, He will be displeased. This is the true meaning of taqwa, and also that you may also be punished if you cross the barriers which you have been told not to outstep, not to disregard. So this is the general meaning of taqwa. In the light of this, you should always understand the word fear as applicable here. Haqqa tuqatihi means as the situation demands, you should fear something according to the dictates of the situation. Now, this can be translated variously, so I'm translating it in one particular way. But let me first explain the word haqqa tuqatihu in the light in which most commentators have discussed it. They have understood by this word the maxim, by the word haqqa as maximum, because it means you should fear Allah so that you fulfill your obligations to the maximum, as the fear of Allah would dictate. So this is the meaning which generally has kept the commentators occupied. And as I will explain further with relation to some of the commentators, you will realize how difficult it became for them to handle this very simple and straightforward verse. Because by haqqa tuqatihi they would understand it means you should fulfill all the obligations of the fear of God as the word may contain. So this is why I translated it as to your maximum. So this they objected to, in a sense. They said that it's impossible for man to fulfill all the obligations which are inherent in this order. And also they have been quoting that after this verse was revealed, Hazrat Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam was approached by some companions who raised the same question and expressed the same fears. They said, "O Prophet of God, how is it possible for man to fulfill the requirements of taqwa as they should be fulfilled?" So it is impossible. Every man is not of the same standard and the same capabilities, while taqwa demands a very high standard of your obedience to God. So I'll come to that part later. Here I want to mention to you that this can be translated in other ways as well. Haqqa tuqatihi can mean that when we ask you, when you require you to fear God, you should not fear Him like you fear beasts. like you fear human beings, like you fear the concept of ghosts and this and that. The fear of God must be understood in relation to God. So haqqa tuqatihi would refer to God particularly, keeping Him in view. You should fear Him. Here He would be stressed, not haqqa. In the first meaning which I explained to you, the stress was on haqqa. So we'll come to that later. I'm not ruling it out. That also stands good in its own place. But I'm pointing out another meaning to you, which means when you emphasize the word He, that means you should fear God in relation to God. And here the fear must acquire that special connotation which can only be acquired by this word when you think of God. So this becomes a completely different word, because no one is like God. Your fear of your mother, your parents, your enemies, etc., they all have very limited connotations. Fear of God would acquire a completely different connotation. For instance, those criminals who think they can escape justice, although they fear police, although they fear the arm of law, but they find themselves hidden under the cover of darkness sometimes, and under the cover of their cleverness, and they think they will not be caught. But they still fear. So God tells us, this is one of the meanings, that when you do something wrong, remember that you are fearing God, whose knowledge encompasses everything, whose knowledge penetrates all covers and all darknesses. So you are open to Him. Whatever you are doing in His sight. So that is the meaning of fear of God when you think of fearing His punishment. Similarly, when you disregard the rights of your brothers, your sisters, your mothers, your fears are also subdued because of your cleverness in hiding your intentions. Sometimes you are harsh to your sister, and when the mother reprimands you, you say, no, you don't understand, this is the reason why I did it, and that is the reason, and this is what she did to me first, for instance. This happens in everyday life, in every home, but you can't do that to God. Again, God knows why you did it. So not only the act of crime is hidden from God, but also the intentions lying behind the acts of crime. They're also in the knowledge of God. So that fear acquires a completely different connotation. You are dragged out from your dark recesses into the open sunshine. And there, in the sight of God, you are doing it while everything is now detected on the surface. So this is the meaning of haqqa tuqatihi. If you stress the word He. And the other meaning, which I mentioned before, means to the maximum of how God should be feared. Now this meaning, as I suggested before, always presents some difficulties. Like it has been quoted, some companions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam approached him and expressed their fears and dissatisfaction at the revelation of this verse. They said, now we will not be able to fulfill the right of taqwa as it should be fulfilled. So we shall all fail in our responsibilities. God is expecting too much from us. That was the essence of what they said. Now, some of the commentators of the Holy Quran have gone too far to justify the meaning of this verse as they understood it. And they referred to another verse which said, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu taqullaha mastata'tum. I'll read which. You remember the reference of this verse? No, it says, now where is it from? I mean, the verse, there is no reference there. But anyway, there is a verse of the Holy Quran which was revealed after this verse, and which says, Fattaqullaha mastata'tum. You should fear Allah as best as you can. So it unleashed another debate. The commentators are now divided regarding the relationship of this verse with the previous verse, the verse which we are commenting upon. Some believed that this verse under consideration has been cancelled out by this later verse, Mastatatum. So they insist, in a manner of speaking, that their interpretation is all right. Haqqa tuqatihi should be understood as they understood it, but because it is impossible, so God cancelled this order, as if God had ordered something impossible first and then cancelled it out. They forgot that by trying to solve one problem, they added a much graver one, and something which is an insult to God. It's impossible for God to have ordered something which was not within the means of His servants to perform, and then they raised hue and cry and protested. Then God thought better of it and said, all right, I cancel it. Now you better start doing this instead of that. This is all extremely absurd. That is why Allama Razi and some other scholars of renown have, and Hazrat Ibn Arabi as well, have rejected this meaning. They say Mastatatum is, this verse is an explanation of the previous verse, not something contradictory to it, but it explains to you and corrects the meaning which you had drawn from it. It says when you say haqqa tuqatihi, it means haqqa in relation to your efforts, not in relation to what is due to God. It's impossible for anyone to pay his dues to God, but it is possible for everyone to pay his dues to God according to his own capacity. So, manistatatum, according to these scholars, is a reference to man's capacity. And then the whole problem is resolved. There is no question at all regarding man's ability to do it or not to do it. Now that also is not possible for everyone to do. Possible in the sense that if everybody performs his responsibilities according to the best of his abilities, then he would become perfect. So here the meaning is just simply this: always attempt to do it. Always try sincerely to perform your obligations to God, obligations to fear of God. That would be the reference to the fear. You should fear God as God should be feared, out of respect, out of love, and out of the knowledge that His knowledge is all encompassing. And then you should fear Him according to the best of your capacity and best of your capabilities. وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. And do not die until you have become Muslims or those who have truly submitted to God. Now this also raises another question which has not been attended by most of the commentators because they were preoccupied with the problem which they had created for themselves by first wrongly translating the word and then insisting that that was right, and got involved in this way into a rigmarole from which it was very difficult for them to get extricated. But here, there is another problem, of course. How can you control your own life, the timing of your life? How can you decide when you should die and when you should not? Because it is beyond you. So there is not just one problem, there are two problems, a couple of problems wedded together or welded together. Both, if you misunderstand, both would be impossible for you to perform, both orders, I mean. So here the meaning is, not one meaning, in fact it's a beautiful verse which exhorts us to always be mindful of what we do by way of submission to God. It reminds us that every moment you are taking a risk, because the question of life and death is not in your control. So remember, every wrong step you take is a risk. You make yourself vulnerable to God. And as such, if He does not punish you, it is His mercy. So if you understand this meaning, then all the time, not only the fear of God would be reminded to you, but also your responsibility to be grateful to God for His mercy would come together with the thought of the fear. Because really, this is exactly what we're doing. If some child misbehaves in the family and he is not punished by his elders, there are two attitudes which can be born out of this leniency of the elders. One, that he is emboldened to commit more and more crime. And the other is that he feels more and more conscious of his folly and becomes shy of doing that because he sees it is wrong and he knows that out of courtesy and mercy he is not being reprimanded. So what should be the meaning here? The meaning is already commanded by the word fear. So when you fear somebody, then you cannot be emboldened by his leniency. Then you can only think of his kindness in not punishing you. So the other meaning cannot be taken. There is a safety valve applied here. And that valve is provided by the word taqwa. So this second part of the verse tells us that every moment you live in sin or in defiance to the injunctions of the Quran, or live indecently, in any manner of speaking, you are liable now to be punished. Every moment the sword can drop on your head. So remember this in two ways. Number one, be conscious of your danger and fear God, that once your time has come, then there will be no time for repentance. Then you will die exactly in the state in which you are found by the angel of death. And secondly, you should also go on expressing your gratitude to Allah and be always mindful of His mercy. What a God He is permitting you, but this should be mixed with the fear. Now, this is the most perfect balance that can be stricken. And if we achieve this balance in our attitudes, then daily our lifestyle will improve and the quality of our conduct would continue to improve. Again, La tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun reminds us of prayer. Looking at it from a different angle, there is something which we are obliged to do, and there is something which is in relation to that obligation is beyond our control and is in the control of someone else. So there are two parties involved to this. The one which is giving order withholds a part of the condition which is attached to our behavior. That is the condition of life and death. That is held by God in His own hand, and we are told not to die until we have submitted. So the meaning is obvious. We are made to pray. We are told that we must constantly pray. وَتَوَفَّنَا مَعَ الْأَبْرَارِ. That is the meaning of that prayer which you have already read in the previous chapter. That, oh God, life is your hand, and you want us to die pious as righteous people. So please do not make us die until we have become pious. Or let us die in the act of piety. These are the two meanings attached to this, and both meanings can be related to this verse. وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Because to be abrar requires you to be a Muslim, not in name but in the meaning. Muslim here in relation to God means somebody who has submitted himself entirely and totally. So this verse would mean that we are reminded to pray to God, oh God, do not cause us to die until we have reached that perfection of submission which you require us to reach. And here, what that standard of perfection is would be left ambiguous and untold. Because if you pray in that manner, then you are safe. You can always say, oh our Lord, we don't know the full meaning of this verse as applicable to our personal capabilities. Because this verse is now in total relation to our own capabilities. And it so happens that most of us, in fact, do not know our own capabilities. So everything is now open to question. So the best formula would be to pray to God, Tawaffana ma'al abrar, as you understand. And He has already taught us that prayer. Or Tawaffana ma'al muslimin, make us die when we are Muslims in your sight. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. And hold fast to the rope of Allah, individually as well as collectively. Jamian here means collectively. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. And do not split up into factions or behave like a lost sheep and leave the community by going astray and leading an individual life. This means tafarraqu can be understood both in the sense of factions, that do not split up into factions and firqas, etc. And tafarraqu also means like a stray bird or a stray sheep which leaves its flock and is lost. This also happens in everyday life. Sometimes a man does not create a new sect, but he begins to lead an individual life and he thinks it is enough. In everyday life, we come across such people among Ahmadis and also among non-Ahmadis. Among Ahmadis, the reason why they lose themselves to the Jamaat is their own weaknesses. They suffer from some weaknesses, they want to shun some responsibilities, they do not want to go through the bother of being washed every time and being brought to censure regarding some of their follies, etc. So they want to remain out of sight of human beings. Now this verse, the previous verse, has already delivered this message to everyone. You can't. Because it's not a question of human being observing you. It is a question of God observing you. So haqqa tuqatihi should remind them that it is impossible. They can run away from human observation, but they can never run away from the observation of God, so it is a meaningless exercise. And secondly, chanda and these things, they are sometimes compelling factors for such weak people. They say if we are in the Jamaat, they will always be asking us for this chanda and that obligation and that obligation, Khudam al-Ahmadi Ajlas and Ansarullah and Atfal and all that. So why not run away from all this nonsense as they consider it? But the second part of the verse reminds them, La tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. You are expected to die a Muslim. And as Muslim, you must perform all your obligations. So tafarraqu here is also applicable to these individuals. The other individuals who would like to lead a life of individual freedom among non-Ahmadis do it on the excuse that we believe only in the book and we don't believe in any organization. And as such, don't come to us with the differences regarding sects and this and that. All this is un-Islamic, all this was created after the book was revealed, and so leave us alone. This is our Islam, the book and we. While they forget the word Jamia. The Holy Quran requires us to hold to the rope of Allah fast, not individually, but Jamia. So individually has, of course, its meaning, but in a different sense. Jamia here takes away their excuse of leading an individual life. This is the responsibility of every Muslim to find some Jamia. And if that Jamia is wrong, then of course everybody else has a right to tell them, look here, the Jamia you are sticking to is not the Jamia based on the concept of the Holy Quran. So please change your side and come to that Jamia. This becomes then an open question and becomes everybody's responsibility to admonish each other to follow the right Jamia. But Jamia is a must. No one can run away from Jamia, because the verse is very clear that وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. So tafarraqu here should not only be applicable to firqas, it should be also applicable, as I have mentioned, to individual life. So you are neither permitted to create firqas, that is the factions and scions, nor you are permitted to lead an individual stray life like a lost sheep. In both cases, you are vulnerable. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ. Now, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ, here the hablillah is a word which has been differently interpreted and translated. The word habl, according to the dictionary, has many connotations. First of all, habl means rope. the literal meaning is rope. Then born out of this relationship, because rope relates two things together and binds them. So binding, ta'alluq, relationship, ahd wa misaq, which means covenant or a treaty, responsibility. Also some have translated it as aman, which is to give protection, and means, because sometimes you use the rope to draw water and this and that, or to bind animals and so on. So this rope is a very useful instrument. So it has also acquired, because of the repeated uses, the meaning of instrument. Qurb Visale Ilahi, which means nearness of God and meeting with God. Also, the jugular vein is called habl, because this is the most important vein for which connects mind with the heart, and if this vein is severed, then jugular artery, I think, or jugular vein, both are responsible for this, both are important for the maintenance of life. So I think this should be translated both as jugular artery and jugular vein. Again, according to Lisan al-Arab, Hablu min Allah means obedience to the dictates of the Holy Quran. Habul, from the same infinitive, means that device which you use to climb a tree, a tall tree. They have made a sort of contrivance with a rope, of course, which they use when they climb tall trees. Otherwise, there is always a fear of them falling back, so that both their hands remain free. That's called habul. Al-hablan, the day and night. Habil is a man who is very intelligent and also very brave. Habl also means to fill something. And this meaning, the word may have acquired because generally the ropes were very extensively used for drawing water from wells. So to fill some utensil with the help of rope, ultimately transferred the meaning of filling to the rope itself, to the word rope. But anyway, they point out that the word it has a meaning of filling, because also a pregnant woman is referred to sometimes by the Arab as hubla, whose belly is full. So hubla in that sense, that she is pregnant. So in view of all these meanings, let's see what the earlier commentators have understood this word, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ, hold fast to the rope of Allah. What does rope mean here? According to Hazrat Ibn Arabi, Hablullah means the covenant with God. And this is one of the best meanings that were understood by earlier translators. but he refers not to the covenant of Bay'ah, but to that covenant which the Holy Quran mentions was taken even before the creation of the universe. That is, Alastu bi rabbikum, qalu bala. That when God decided to create man, he asked him, his soul or his blueprint, whatever you may translate it with, am I not your Lord? And that something responded by saying, why not? Why not? Yes, you are our Lord. So that only means, in fact, that God has imprinted his belief on every soul, and intrinsically and by nature. If we delve deeper into ourselves, we will find that imprint, and we can recognize it. And that is why there is so much thirst for the concept of some God. That is why if there is no God, people make gods. Some make themselves their gods, but they can't live without God. So this is the meaning. So Hazrat Ibn Arabi has understood the meaning correctly, but has pointed out in a direction which is difficult to follow, perhaps too far stretched. So here the meaning should be an ordinary, well understandable meaning. And as far as I am concerned, I believe he is right, but here the covenant refers to the covenant of Bay'ah, which is taken after a messenger is sent to the people, and that becomes his rope which connects him with God and which must never be severed after that, or the contact must never be loosened. Allama Alauddin Ali bin Muhammad في معاني التنزيل المعروف بالتفسير الخازن. His tafsir, which is معاني التنزيل, also is known widely as Tafsir al-Khazin. It's much popular name. He says that al-hablu means any means which can convey you to your objective. So, according to him, the meaning of protection also it becomes one of the meanings of the word habl, because when with the means of habl you reach the place of your desire, and when you are in fear, you run to sanctuaries or places of security. So that meaning also has got transferred to the word habl. Ibn Abbas, according to Allama Alauddin, has understood the word to refer generally to the religion as such, religion revealed by God. Some believe that the Holy Quran is the habl. According to Ibn Masud, it is the Jama'ah which is habl. Some say any injunction from God, any order from Him, becomes a habl in itself. In further detail, if we examine Tafsir Razi, which is a tafsir which comprises so many other commentaries in one book, that if you read Allama Razi, you have read most of the tafasir. And also Allama Razi stands out among all the earlier commentators as one of the, if not the most, one of the most enlightened commentators. Sometimes he appears to be belonging to this age rather than to an older age. And sometimes, of course, shadows are cast on him, which as a human being he could not avoid. But those shadows belong to that particular age, which is not the mistake of the commentator, but he is helpless in those regards. But mostly, I find Allama Razi as one of the most enlightened commentators of the Holy Quran ever born. So his tafsir, because he also mentions others, is generally sufficient, but of course it's not all comprising. Sometimes some points are left with by him, and you have also to have referred to other tafasir. Allama Razi believes that to this order of holding fast to the rope of Allah follows an order by the Holy Quran to abstain from such acts which are forbidden by God. So that reminds us that it is something, this rope is something which is which brings us to brings us the picture of treading a very narrow and dangerous path where we are likely to lose our balance. So a rope is strung within our reach. Sometimes you ride a narrow staircase, which is very difficult, and there is every danger of your losing your balance. Sometimes you walk a tight rope itself, and if you are not holding fast to any means of safety, then you are likely to falter and fall. So he says, because in the previous verse we are told not to do such acts as are forbidden, so that refers to a narrow path which we must cautiously tread. So the rope of Allah here would be something to hold fast to for by way of keeping your balances and safety. So that again would refer to the teachings of the Holy Quran itself. So ultimately what the conclusion that he is drawn is, so everything which supports you at the time of trial, which keeps you from faltering, would be called as rope of Allah. And here it has, when I read it, my mind went to dua, in fact. Otherwise, the teachings itself is the pulsirat. So how could the teaching be the rope and the pulsirat at the same time? What we know as pulsirat, as the concept of pulsirat is that bridge which everyone will have to cross after death, which is so narrow that normally it's impossible for a man to keep his balance. And underneath there is a raging fire of hell. And also the flames are like, hooks extending towards you to draw you back into into itself. So the flames would rise high to capture you and hook you back into the hell. And the path is so narrow. So that concept, in fact, is based on what we experience here in this world. It's only a picture created there of what we have already gone through. In daily life, at every step, we have to take difficult decisions, make difficult decisions. And most likely, we are most likely to take wrong decisions. Because at every step, the demand is so difficult and the temptation is so strong. So this is what Allama Razi has described. So he says everything which would help you take right decisions and maintain your balance would be the rope of Allah. To that much I agree. But in my opinion, in this context, the rope has to be dua. Because there is no other way this can be interpreted. And this is borne out by the practices of all the prophets of Allah and all the pious people. At every moment of decision making, they pray to Allah. At every moment of temptation, they pray to Allah. Even when they made a misstep and they were supposed to be falling, then they prayed to Allah and they were lifted out of that pit. Like we find in the case of Hazrat Yunus. क्या वर्ष है? ला इलाहा इल्ला अंता सुब्हानका व इन्नी कुन्तु मिनज़ ज़ालिमीन. When he realized that he had committed a mistake and he had lost his balance, he prayed, La ilaha illa anta subhanaka, there is no God but you. That is the meaning, there is no rope but yours. You are the only savior. And you are the only person who is above mistake. So what a beautiful prayer it is. A cry of distress revealed so powerfully that it had to reach its target, the mercy of God. وَإِنِّي كُنْتُ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. And I know, I admit, I confess that I was among the wrongdoers. So the rope of God here has to be understood in this context as prayer. So that also reminds us that the rope should also be translated like haqqa tuqatihi. In relation to God, sometimes rope would appear to be one thing and sometimes as another thing. And this issue of what the rope means would be determined by every situation. So the essence of the word rope is your contact with God. And that contact with God is essentially dua. Because the Holy Quran also in another place refers to this and says, فَقَدْ قَذَّبْتُمْ فَسَوْفَ يَكُونُ لِزَامًا. You have refused the importance of prayer. And you have forgotten that this is the life link between you and God. Like there is a life link between the mother and the embryo, which is called, Dr. Sahib? Placenta. So it is like placenta. We in this world live like an embryonic, go through an embryonic stage. And every moment we must be connected with God through that placenta of prayer. If we reject this, then according to the Holy Quran, فَقَدْ كَذَّبْتُمْ فَسَوْفَ يَكُونُ لِزَامًا. Lizama means something which follows by way of bacterial attacks. Lizama is something which is a natural outcome, which has to be there. It's going to stick to you now. So the moment the link between the embryo and the placenta is broken, then the bacteria and all sorts of hazards, get attached to that embryo and it's destroyed. So Hablullah, in essence, from whatever angle you look, would be dua and your link with God. That is what I have. You see, I was not throughout sure, but because a competent physician had told me, so I was using this word. What I had in mind was the umbilical cord or umbilical, that's right. Umbilical cord, not placenta. Placenta envelops the thing. This is the cover which carries the baby. But it is the umbilical cord which provides the link, like the link of dua with God. So the first meaning, according to me, is dua, and the second meaning is prophet of God. Of course, book is the rope of God. Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ has also interpreted it as the book. But the book by itself cannot keep you jamia. And the whole context of these injunctions is to keep you together, united under one banner, and keep you jamia, as a jama'ah. Book alone cannot serve this purpose. It is the same book which was revealed to Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is before us today, which we are commenting upon. And this book by itself has failed to keep the Muslim body together as one. They have got dispersed in both ways. First of all, they have got divided into sections and factions, etc. And secondly, they have also started living individual lives. And this process of individuality is gaining over the process of factional division. Because under each faction and each sect, you find this disintegration into individualism. So in reality, if you fully view what is happening to the world of Islam, you would not find the Muslims divided only into 72 ropes or bindings or sects. Each sect is further divided into other views and schools. And each school is again further divided into individuals who are responsible to none. And they say, again, as I told you, their argument would be, this is the book, this is the rope. If you have a right to interpret, why have we not? So this is the meaning which we attach to this, and we infer from this, so we have every right according to this book. Nobody can take away this right from us. So that very verse, which was revealed to keep the Muslims united, is now being turned into an instrument of division by a wrong interpretation. So that shows us that the books alone cannot be enough and sufficient to keep the followers together. It is the prophets who do it. As long as this book was occupying the same period in time when Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also alive here on this earth, there was no division. Of course, the tendency to divide was there. Repeatedly, people disagreed with each other on the question of the book itself and on the question of many other things. And every time these differences were referred to Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his decision became binding on everybody. So the binding force became that nema, which is prophethood. That is why some of the scholars have interpreted the word nema here as prophethood. Waskuru ne'matallahi alaykum. It is followed by this mention. Waskuru ne'matallahi alaykum is kuntum adaan fa'allafa baina qulubikum. remember that special mercy of Allah, that is Nema. An'amta alayhim is the prayer which we beg of Allah, Siratal Lazina An'amta alayhim daily, so many times. And Takmeel Inam or Itmam Nema means prophethood. So here, the rope of Allah should be understood to mean the prophethood as such, and particularly in this context, the Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet of God. Because in himself, he combines also the book and his person. In no other place you find both these things united. So he becomes a living symbol of the Holy Quran. So those who have interpreted the Bible as the Quran are not wrong, they're right. But its perfect meaning would be when this rope, this Quran is understood not as a book written on papers, but a book written on human character. A character which is live, which is conscious of itself, and which becomes a real model for mankind. As such, Hablullah has to be Hazrat Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. Wa'tasimu bihablillah means hold fast to this Prophet of God who has become the uniting force. And there again it is mentioned that it is not because this Prophet has bound you together with his own ability. The Holy Quran, addressing the Holy Prophet himself, reminds him that وَلَوْ أَنْفَقْتَ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا بِرَحْمَةٍ مَا لِنْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ है वर्स लिखी فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. It doesn't say that you have not been instrumental in binding Muslims together. What it says is you have become instrumental because of a very special of grace of Allah upon you. And that is linta lahum. Now the book cannot have that characteristic. Linta lahum means that you have become so soft for them, so loving for them. You are a mercy personified. And this is what is essential to bind people together. Now when you apply this to real life situations, then you truly understand the meaning, and there is no gainsaying this. The books are like dry mechanical messages. There are very few people who can read through the book and reach the pith of life and are deeply influenced by the messages. But still the books lack the quality of softness to a very particular person to win his heart. So if people are fighting with each other, they are warring, they are in a state of turmoil and agitation, where nobody trusts others, where hatred begets hatred, and so on and so forth, like it was happening in the Arab world, then how can just the book unite these people? But a leadership which is extremely kind, forgiving, understanding, and which is so trustworthy that everybody believes that this person, this leader of ours, which God has appointed, is really kind to us and loving to us, such a leadership can bind people together. So in this reference, always a reference is made, in fact, to Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, And some people have misunderstood this verse as if God is denying that it was you who did it. It is not so. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. It is you who were instrumental. But it was because of our special mercy upon you. We gave you those special qualities which are essential for binding a disintegrating people together. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. Now he is the same recipient of the Holy Quran. But God says that if you had a different type of heart, if you had a heart which was unforgiving, harsh, unloving, then they would all have run away from you. And the book could not hold them together. How true this observation is. The moment Hazrat Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam shuts his eyes and departs this world, they all get scattered once again. This was the first shock of their separation from Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam that was manifested in the great turmoil we observe immediately after the demise of Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam among those who were not properly trained. Those who were so deeply binded to Ahad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or bound to Ahad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that they were ultimately handed over to God. There, that rope had become a rope where the means disappears in significance, in a manner of speaking, and then God and man are united together. Such people did not fail in that trial. They remained fast in their promises and true in their promises, and kept holding the rope of God as it is worthy to be held. But those who were just yet attached to Muhammad because of his special kindness, when he disappeared, their contact with God also disappeared temporarily. Then they came back ultimately. So, lan fadlu min hawlik is a statement which is proved beyond the shadow of doubt in the light of the early history of Islam. So, hablum, according to some, of course, the Quran is habl because it is the word of God, and we do not deny it at all. But this word lacks that unifying quality unless translated into human conduct. And when it becomes alive in the practices of someone who follows the word of God, then this meaning would be applicable to the context in which we are trying to conceive the meaning of Hablullah. But what would happen after Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam has left? This leads us to many other possibilities. Number one, Khilafah. After Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we have very clear instructions from him in different places, Khilafah would become the representative of the rope of Allah. Because the rope of Allah in essence is Khilafatullah. And this word is applicable to the prophets, not to the vicegerents of prophets. But when they are not present physically, then their office, like a shadow, is passed on to their resurgents, those who succeed them, and in that way, Jamia is entirely dependent on people mustering round the office of Khilafat. So, in this context, they are Hablullah and there is no gainsaying it. Remove Khilafat and they all begin to scatter once again. It was Hazrat Abu Bakr Radhiyallahu Ta'ala anhu who transformed the whole situation after the Muslim body politic and Muslim body religious had become disintegrated. And it seemed that everybody was either being divided into factions or individually was being scattered. There seems to be no hope when you read that part of the history. You know, it is impossible to believe that such people who seem to be shattered to pieces by the impact of Muhammad's demise would ever be bound together once again. So it was Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq's Khilafah, the first Khilafah, which brought about this great miracle. So that proves beyond a shadow of doubt that Khilafah works as that rope which is mentioned here in this context, of a binding force for the believers. And then as long as Khilafah remained Rashida, we see the deviants, of course, were being attempted repeatedly. But all such attempts were defeated by the Khilafah. And they were held together by a stronger force. Once Khilafat-e-Rashida, unfortunately, was, I don't say died out, because it changed its form in some other ways. I have mentioned it before. But Khilafat-e-Rashida as one single representative of God was no more. Then you find the Muslim body all scattered into pieces, and division after division started taking place. So the second meaning of Hablullah here would be Khilafah after the demise of a prophet, as long as Khilafat is held intact. Then after the Khilafah, those holy people who are symbols, living symbols of the teachings of the Holy Quran, and who are specially gifted by God, so that they keep the example of the Holy Prophet alive. They were as living symbols of the Hablullah. So in that order, they should be treated as Hablullah. So according to my understanding, all Mujaddideen, and not only Mujaddideen, but also all the holy people in various countries of the Islamic world who were truly pious and around whom gathered some people on the covenant of piety, not on the covenant of deviance. Those were also to be counted among Hablullahs. And then also there is a period of greater darkness when there seems to be nothing left. These, this rare phenomenon, because it does become a rare phenomenon for a person to become godly in such ages of darkness, who are truly devoted to God and who have no ulterior motives, no personal objectives to be gained, who truly want to serve in total sincerity, they become a rare phenomenon, unfortunately, in the time of dark ages. Then what should be done? It is then that we are left with nothing but the barest meaning of the word, that is the book of God. And this too can be proved to be correct on the authority of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. Because when he warned Muslims that a time is to come when there would be darkness, there will be many trials for the Muslims and many dangers would surround them. Then the question was raised, what would happen to us? What should we do to escape those difficult periods or dangerous periods of trial? So Rasul Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, then the only source for, the only hope would lie in your returning to the book, because this is something which will remain unchanged. So this also provides us with a comparative study. Books versus people who are pious. People who are pious, unless they are prophets, cannot be entirely considered to represent the book in perfection. And according to the times, the definition of piety also goes through a gradual transformation. And people who are pious in one age may not be considered pious in another age. That is why at the time of fitna of Hazrat Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, a question was addressed to Hazrat Ali that these are the people, a taunt was leveled at him, that these are the people of whom you are leader. So what he said was, look at who was led by, whom Ahzar Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam led. It was people like me. You see, he suddenly turned the angle of the kaleidoscope and a different vision appeared immediately. So the fault lies with you, not with me. As long as we followed Ahzar Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he was Imamul Muttaqeen, no doubt about it. So when you have disintegrated into this shape, then it's not my fault, it is your fault. So also it is, I don't remember the exact the names of the companion who once said, addressing a youth who were tabe'in or tabe'in it was, yes, that today what you consider to be pious, at the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the standard of piety was so high that he would not be counted such a man among the pious people, Ghalib also has spoken of this comparative study. He says, अहले वरा की नज़रों में हर चंद हूँ ज़लील, पर आसियों के फ़िरक़ा में मैं बरगज़ीदा हूँ. Of course, among the pious people, I am a mean person, nothing. An unholy man. But imagine, among the sinners, I am the holiest. Yes. So this is the difference between the book and the people. Models go on changing, but if a book does not change, and the models become suspect, and when you are in a darkness, this is fitna, this is the trial. When you don't know whom to follow and whom not to, where everybody says follow me and you can't decide. Then Ahzar Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam advised, return to the book, this should suffice you. Stick fast to this, then that is the only reliable rope of Allah. But now I think the time is finished, so remaining inshallah tomorrow. We'll try to finish the ruku tomorrow.